Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Marketing Your Practice podcast, the podcast where I have the pleasure of simplifying the marketing and the mindset so you, the chiropractor, can increase your income, your impact, and your enjoyment in practice too. In today's episode, I want to share some lessons that I learned recently. I was on a webinar with a guy by the name of Philippe Nardi, and I watched this guy effortlessly make almost $150,000 in about 3 minutes. And I want to share what I learned and how he was able to do that and how we can apply that to our chiropractic practices so that we can change more lives, we can increase our income, we can impact more people, and we can add a whole bunch more enjoyment into our practice too. Now, Philippe's expertise is he has a piece of software and training, it's trainings more than anything, where he helps coaches and teachers make their Zoom trainings much more fancy and enjoyable and less boring. And so on this training, which my coach put together, Philippe worked his way through what he does and how he can help you. And then he offered his product at the end there. And his product is a $2,000 training course. And he had a limit of 70. And I think they went over that as well. 70 spots available for a course that he was starting at the beginning of January. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this too, he sold out of those spots in a matter of moments. It was effortless. It was fantastic to watch. And I sat there just amazed by the entire process. Now, I've been thinking about it a lot since, what I learned from there and how we can then take that and apply that to what we do as chiropractors as well. So there are 5 lessons that I want to share with you. Now, the first one, before I get into it, I want to tell you a story from a great marketer, a guy by the name of Gary Halbert, is one of the best copywriters to have ever walked this earth. And there's a story about Gary who was teaching a bunch of students, and he had a project for the students to be working on. And in this project, he said, we're going to be opening a restaurant. You guys can open a restaurant, and I'm going to open a restaurant. Now, at the end, I'm going to guarantee that my restaurant outdoes yours. There's only one thing that I want in my restaurant, and you can have anything that you want. What do you want in your restaurant? And the students start raising their hands and they say, well, look, we'll have 5-star food. So he goes, great. You know, we've got a celebrity chef. So we've got some Gordon Ramsay or somebody like that coming in too. We've got a beautiful environment. And they go on and list again and again. He says, is there anything else? Is there anything else? And finally, when they get to the end and they've exhausted their list, he says, here's what I want. He says, I want a starving audience. Now, a starving audience is the one thing that is missing in most marketing campaigns. It's the one thing that stops many chiropractors from having success on social media or any of the marketing platforms that they're reaching out. And lesson number 1 that I got from watching Philippe is there was a perfect audience and product match. Now, so Philippe sells Zoom trainings to coaches and teachers, all right? Now, again, not just any coaches and teachers he works with coaches and teachers who have online businesses. So it's a very narrow niche, and he was talking in this case here. So this whole session was put on by my business coach, invited us along to this training, said there's this guy who I've been working with recently. He's amazing. Come along and listen to him show his stuff. And so first of all, he had a starving audience. And so he was talking to the right people. Now, we need to decide as chiropractors, who should we be talking to, okay? Who is your audience? And again, this is another way of saying that we need to have a niche, and then we need to get in front of them and talk about them. So Kirby, one of my associates, one of my favorite people to have ever worked with as well, an amazing chiropractor, and she herself was really quite an accomplished CrossFit athlete. And her target audience, who she loved looking after, were CrossFit people. And so as a result of that, she would regularly teach classes as a coach, but also mobility and stretching and classes on how the body should repair and manage and performance, those type of things there as well. And so she knew who her target audience were, and she was regularly in front of them. Now, as a result with this, our practice was full of incredibly buff people who would wear long socks all the time, calluses on their hands, often drinking protein shakes and eating sweet potato and bacon. It was full of CrossFitters. So Kirby knew who her audience was, and she was regularly in front of them. Now, if you like looking after athletes, then you need to find a spot where athletes are. You need to make sure that your message is getting in front of them, because The very best message in the world doesn't matter if it's being delivered to the wrong audience. If you don't have a starving audience, okay, if you don't have an audience with a big problem and you can't get in front of them, then you're going to have a hard time getting people to raise their hand and want to come and see you. So the first thing that this means is that you need to decide who is your audience. And the second thing is, where are they? Now, everybody's on social media and everybody is on all social media platforms. So whether that be TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, they're all so big now that you will find people there. But there are platforms where people tend to gravitate towards. And maybe social media is not the best place for you to meet these people. So in Kirby's case, the best place for her to meet these CrossFitters was for her to become involved in that community. She coached them. She coached a couple of sessions per week. She ran free add-on classes for them, foam roller classes, mobility classes, rehab classes, all those things. She was regularly in front of people who had problems. Now, if you know anything to do about CrossFitters, is I think they almost spend as much time injured as they do training, because it's very, very hard to do as well. So she found her starving audience and she was regularly speaking to them as well. Now, in this situation here, what Philip was able to do is he was able to find out somebody else who had his audience. There'll be a theme that runs through today of, joint ventures or partnerships. So there's lots of spots that you can find Philip. He's on YouTube and he's on Instagram as well. But in this situation, he found somebody that had his audience. So Taki, business coach, has lots of coaches that work for him that all have online businesses, and he spoke to them, okay? So that was the first lesson that I realized. Now, my daughter Mackenzie is working for a chiropractor over in London at the moment. There too, she's a CA. She's studying to be a chiropractor. And they recently did a joint venture with a new yoga studio that opened up. Now, you might have noticed that the type of people that often choose chiropractic often like yoga, and vice versa as well. And so what Mackenzie was able to organize was a joint venture between the two, where her team got to be able to expose to the yoga studio, and then vice versa. They both posted about it and they introduced each other to their audiences. Okay, so this is a joint venture. We'll talk more about this as well. So that's number one again, is there was a perfect audience product match. If your message isn't gaining traction, it might not be a message. It might be the audience that you're in front, and maybe you need to work at getting in front of the right audience. Now, the second point or second lesson I learned from there is Philippe had a profound understanding of the pain points of his customers. So at the beginning of the workshop, he did an amazing job at articulating the challenges associated with teaching on Zoom. So community influencer, twice a week, I'm coaching and running trainings on Zoom there too. And we have, sometimes 10, sometimes 30 people on a call all at once, and keeping their attention, stopping them from being distracted and bored, because when you're teaching person to person, it's easy to keep someone's attention. But when they're sitting in front of a computer and they've got their phone there and there's a whole bunch of distractions, it's easier for them to get distracted. Now, he didn't just stop there. This is the logical reason why I might want to improve my Zoom presenting skills and have more fancy things going on there too. But he went a little deeper with that too. He understood not just the logical reasons, but the emotional reasons. And he dived into those and he rubbed a little bit of salt in the wounds there as well, because he talked about emotionally, the reason that many of us want to be coaches and teachers and stuff like that is that we have a message that we want to share. And if people are being distracted, if they're being bored there too, then we don't get to share our magic. This means that our business is more likely to struggle. Maybe we might have to go back to our old job and doing the things that didn't quite fire us up in the first place. So he spoke about all of the reasons to come along. You're going to be a better teacher there too, but you're going to have more impact in the world. You're going to make more money. And you're not going to have to go back to your sucky job that you had beforehand. I noticed when you do a good job with this, it'll be like you are entering the conversation inside your client's mind. So if we go back to Kirby beforehand, given that she was a CrossFitter and she understood them, she understood the frustrations that went along with not being able to get your PBs and your PRs. She understood their language in around WODs and the different lifts there. She knew the injuries they were most likely to get and then the best ways to get them back on track. Kirby knew really clearly. She had a profound understanding of the pain points of her customers, not just the logical ones, but the emotional things that stayed in behind it as well. So these first 2 points here really come back to, you need to know who you're talking to. You need to know where they are, and you need to understand the problems that they have, not just at a logical level, but you need to know them at an emotional level as well. Now, the third lesson I got from Philippe is he did a fantastic job showing, not just telling. Now, as chiropractors, what we're tempted to do is tell people how chiropractic can help there too. Tell them that we're good. Tell them what it can do for their life. Instead, what we need to be doing more is showing them. So Philippe showed the effectiveness of his program. He showed what the results would be at the end of it. He showed us all the amazing things that we'd be able to do and how we'd impress people and how fancy it would look, those sorts of things there too. Now, we can do this same thing by showing our adjustments. Now, this doesn't mean that they have to be those heavy, mic'd up, crack type sort of videos. If you're a pediatric chiropractor, that's the exact opposite of what you'd want to be showing from there too. You need to let your community know how gentle your care is, how happy the babies are lying there on the tables, many of them asleep, smiling. You need to show people getting your work. Now, one of the great examples of this is an Aussie chiropractor, and I don't know if he's still making videos now. I haven't looked at them for a little while ago. A guy by the name of Ian Rossborough. So he was a Gonstead chiropractor, and he had videos on YouTube that millions of views where he would show quite dramatic before to after. So when patients would come in bent over, unable to walk, he would show the weeks of care that he would have them and show an absolute transformation afterwards. At no stage did Ian have to say, I'm good at this, you should come and see me, because you were able to make that conclusion yourself because you saw the amazing results. He didn't tell how good he was, he showed how good he was. Now, there are several ways that you can do this. Testimonials, they're one way. And again, I want you to dive into episode 345. In that, I do a whole episode on ways that you can show proof without testimonials if you're not able to do that. So many of us Aussies can't. But just showing before to afters, letting people draw their own conclusion, letting their own conversations go on in their mind, because in many cases, those conversations are far more profound than what they would be with you. And so Philippe did a great job of just showing us what his work does, what we would be able to do. And it was the effectiveness of his demonstrations that built real value. So how can you show more the results and the transformation that people get rather than just telling them? Now, one of my favorite little videos I've seen of this recently was a great Aussie chiropractor, Tim, who was doing a cervical adjustment, seated cervical adjustment. And we watched the adjustment, and at the end of the adjustment, there was just this radiant, beautiful smile from the patient who was being adjusted. Now, there was no talk about how her life changed or anything else, but it was clear that she really loved that adjustment and that it felt great, okay? So he didn't have to say, hey, listen, come on, get an adjustment, you feel great. He showed that that's what it does. Again, if you want more ways to learn how to do this, check out episode 345. Now, lesson 4 that I learned from Philippe's webinar that he did there as well was the power of testimonials, but not only testimonials, but endorsements. And I'll break these down into 2 different sections for you. So as he was going through and sharing his story, Philippe began this with working with some magicians. Okay, so magicians during COVID, they were unable to do their live shows anymore, and he needed to find a way that he could use Zoom in an engaging way where they could engage with thousands of people, so they got an almost in-person type sort of experience. Now, I don't know a lot of magicians, but it was clear from these magicians that he was showing and how he was saying that they were on television, used to have performed to thousands of people, that there was some social proof and these were impressive individuals. And you think, if they're working with Philippe, maybe he's the real deal. Now, that meant a lot. But even more than that is he had an endorsement from somebody that was close to me, and that was my coach. So my coach had been using Philippe's stuff, and I'd been noticing on his trainings over the previous month that they'd really improved. He was doing all these cool things. I'm like, how do I learn how to do that? And he said, I'll show you how to do that. Make sure you come along to this webinar with Philippe. And so I had this endorsement from somebody that I really, really trusted, okay? And so if you're thinking about doing and wanting to do joint ventures, community partnerships, things like this, perhaps the first thing that you want to do before talking to their audience is see if you can get a result